What's up, YouTube? This is the 82 and 0 podcast. Continuing on, today we're going to talk about Elgin Baylor. Now, Elgin Gay Baylor was born September 16th, 1934, and he was born in Washington, D.C. His nickname growing up was Rabbit. And like I said, he grew up in Washington, D.C. He was the son of Lewis, and he began playing basketball when he was 14 years old. Although he grew up near D.C., City Recreation Center African Americans were banned from using the facilities because this was during the Jim Crow era still, and segregation. How fucked up is that in the nation's capital, people were living in an apartheid system, so to speak, and Baylor had limited access to basketball courts growing up. He had two basketball playing brothers named Sal and Kermit. After stints at Southwest Boys Club and Brown Junior High School, Baylor was a three-time All-City player in high school. Baylor played his first 2 years of high school basketball at Phelps Vocational School in 1951 and the 1952 season. At the time, however, the public schools in Washington, D.C. were segregated, so he only played against other black schools. There he set his first area scoring record of 44 points versus Cardozo High School. During his two All-City years at Phelps, he averaged 18.5 and 27.6 points per game per season. He did not perform well academically, however, and he dropped out of school in the 52-53 season to work in a furniture store and play basketball in the local recreational leagues. Baylor reappeared for the 1954 season as a senior, playing for an all-black team at Spingarn High School. Then he was 6'5" and 225. The senior was named First Team Washington All-Metropolitan and was the first African American player to be named to that team. He also won the SSA's Livingston Trophy and the area's best basketball player for 1954. He finished with 36.1 average for his 8 inter-Division II league games. On February 3rd, 1954, in a game against his old Phelps team, he scored 31 in the first half. Playing with 4 fouls the entire second half, Baylor scored 32 more points to establish a new DC area record of 63 points. This broke the record of 52 that Western's Jim Wexler had set 4 years prior to that. However, because Wexler was white and Baylor was black, Baylor's record did not receive the same press coverage from the media, including the Washington Post. And it's unfortunate, man. This is why these arguments you hear today, where people say like, oh, these greats from back then, they didn't even know how to play basketball. They were just figuring out how to play. Motherfucker, they had to do everything they could to play basketball. Elgin Baylor, I've read stories where he had to sneak onto city courts at night just to get his shots in. Now, despite his success at high school basketball, no major college wanted to recruit Baylor because at the time, college scouts did not recruit from black schools. While some colleges were willing to accept Baylor, he did not qualify academically. A friend of Baylor who attended College of Idaho helped arrange a football scholarship for Baylor for the 54-55 academic year. Baylor never played a football for a school, however, instead he was accepted to the college basketball team without having to try out. He outperformed the other players on this team, averaging over 31 points and 20 rebounds per game. After the first season at the College of Idaho, the college dismissed its head basketball coach and restricted the scholarships. A Seattle car dealer interested Baylor in Seattle University, and Baylor sat out a year to play for Westford Ford an American Athletic Union team in Seattle, while establishing eligibility at Seattle. The Minneapolis Lakers drafted him in the 14th round of the 1956 NBA draft, but Baylor opted to stay in college instead. During the 56-57 season, Baylor averaged 59.7 points per game and 20.3 rebounds per game for Seattle. The next season, Baylor averaged 32.5 points per game and led Seattle University, then known as the Red Hawks, to the NCAA championship game, Seattle's only trip to the Final Four, failing to the Kentucky Wildcats. Following his junior year, Baylor was drafted again by the Minneapolis Lakers with the number 1 pick in the 1958 draft. And this time, he opted to leave school to join them for the 58-59 season. Now, this is something I want to talk about. I feel this is so important nowadays to talk about. So the Minneapolis Lakers, as we know today, are the Los Angeles Lakers. They had success in the 40s and 50s, early 50s, with George Mikan. He got them 5 championships. But after Mikan retired, the team was nearly bankrupt. They weren't drawing in fans. And this is why you got to understand how important Elgin Baylor is. And if there was no Elgin Baylor, I'm sorry, there would be no Lakers franchise today. The team would have folded. He knew how to get asses in the seats. And this is what grinds my gears with, and it's funny because it's Laker fans that don't even realize this. I think most other fan bases are aware of Elgin Baylor's importance to the Laker franchise. But you see, like, the owner of the Lakers, Jeannie Buss, she didn't even include Elgin Baylor in her top 5 most important Lakers of all time. And when Elgin Baylor passed in March 22nd, 2021, just a little over a year ago, on the Lakers fan page, 80% of these motherfuckers didn't even know who Elgin Baylor was. They were triggered that they took the time of day to talk about some player other than their current star on the Lakers. You know, this is my problem with Lakers fans. They have no appreciation for basketball history, no appreciation for legends who came before. It fucking grinds my gears how stupid some of these motherfuckers are. So I want to get into this. He had an amazing rookie campaign with the Minneapolis Lakers. He put up 24.9 points per game, 15 rebounds per game, and 4.1 assists. And he actually led his team to the finals. They played against the Boston Celtics. And yes, they lost to the Boston Celtics, but the team was starting to get more crowds. And he won Rookie of the Year. So, going into the next season, for the 59-60 season, this is when stuff started to change for the Minneapolis Lakers in a good way. Like I said, they were starting to get more fans, but they realized they had to make a move. They had to get out of Minneapolis. It wasn't going to be a big enough market. So the 59-60 season would be the Lakers' final year in Minneapolis. Baylor had a good season. They didn't get back to the finals or anything. But now 60-61, the team would officially relocate to Los Angeles. And this, at the time, there has never been a basketball team that far west, as far as the NBA goes anyways. And yeah, you had the Dodgers in LA now, but basketball, really? And it paid off. And they also drafted Jerry West. And this is one of the most formidable duos in NBA history, Jerry West and Elgin Baylor. From the 1960-61 season to the 62-63 season, Baylor averaged 34.8 points per game, 38.3 points per game, and 34 points per game. That's how crazy he was. And he actually set the scoring record, which obviously was broken by Wilt, but he scored 71 points against the New York Knicks. It's kind of crazy how the Knicks have bad luck. And the record would stand, like I said, until Chamberlain scored 100 points against the Knicks. But Baylor was actually a United States Army Reserve, and he was called in active duty during the 1961-62 season. And he was being stationed at Fort Lewis in Washington. He could play for the Lakers only on weekend pass, so he would only play the weekend games. He was unable to practice with the team before or during the season, and had to fly coach across the country on weekends to join the team at whatever arena they were appearing. Despite playing only 48 games that season, he still managed to score 38.3 points per game, the highest average in the NBA other than Wilt Chamberlain, and he averaged 18.6 rebounds per game and 4.6 assists per game. So it's kind of crazy how good he played despite, not being able to be on the court a lot at the time. And despite him not playing much, the 62 Lakers went 54-26. They made it to the finals, and they went up against the Boston Celtics. And it comes down to Game 7, and unfortunately, the Lakers lost by just 3 points. A very tough series, and to make matters worse, it was an overtime game. It's kind of crazy how epic that is, So that's too bad. I'm sure that defeat hurt quite a bit. And so Elgin Baylor, he would just kind of go throughout the 60s. I want to say from that 61, 62, up into, I want to say, probably like 67, 68. He was in his prime. He scored a lot of points. And he would, his game style is very similar to Julius Erving. He had a great above-the-rim play style. Great rebounder, high vertical leap. Anyways, towards the late 60s, when this Lakers team acquired Wilt Chamberlain, he started to break down. And he would have knee problems. I've talked a lot about their losses, so I won't get into it in this video. You can watch other videos on it where I talk about it. But the Lakers lost a lot. Heartbreaking losses. In 1969, they lost when they were the favorites by just 2 points. And I would say Elgin Baylor's last good year would be 69-70. He was 35 years old. He put up 24 and 10. But he would have his knee injury then. And he just was a shell of himself after that. For the 70-71 season, he only played 2 games. And in the 71-72 season, Baylor just, he only played 9 games that year. And he was in a lot of pain in his knees. And he just felt like he couldn't play at a high level anymore. And he wanted the Lakers to give younger stars on the team, like Jim McMillan, a shot. So he retired. And it's really sad because right after he retired, 9 games in that season, the Lakers go on a 33-game win streak, and they win a championship that year. All he had to do was hold out 1 more year, and he would have had a championship. In my eyes, he should count as a champion. They don't officially recognize that, though, because he retired. But, maybe he could have just sat on the bench. But some people criticize Baylor. They say he he's a reason why a lot of these teams lost, because he was an inefficient shot chucker. I'm not here to say either way on that. I just know he was a great player. The advanced metrics prove it. His stats prove it. So let's talk about his stats. He averaged 27.4 points per game for his career, 13.5 rebounds per game, which is the most for anyone under, I should just say anyone at his size. He was only 6'5". He has a 22.7 career PER. He had a lot of win shares, I want to point out. And, he's a 10-time All-NBA, Rookie of the Year, top 75 player of all time. He's the savior of the Lakers franchise. That's Elgin Baylor. What I want to talk about, what happened after his playing career, because I think a lot of people think it's overlooked. So in 1974, Baylor was hired as the assistant coach of the New Orleans Jazz. But he wasn't a great coach, and he was fired following the 78-79 season, shortly before the team moved to Salt Lake City. Now, he would be the executive of the Los Angeles Clippers from 1986 to 2008. In 1986, Baylor was hired by the Los Angeles Clippers as the team's vice president of basketball operations. He was selected as NBA Executive of the Year in 2006. During his tenure with the Clippers, managed only 2 winning seasons and amassed a win-loss record of 607 wins, 1,153 losses. They made only the playoffs 4 times and won only 1 playoff series. He stayed in that capacity for 22 years until October 2008. But we all know about how dysfunctional that Clippers franchise was. I don't hold it over Baylor. I more so hold it over Donald Sterling. In 2009, he filed an employment discrimination lawsuit against the Clippers, team owner Donald Sterling, team president Andy Roser, and the NBA. He had alleged that the team was underpaid, that he was underpaid during his tenure with the team, and that he was fired because of his age and race. Baylor later dropped the racial discrimination claims and suit. In 2011, a jury decided in the Clippers' favor on Baylor's remaining claims, finding Baylor's termination was based on the team's poor performance. However, Baylor felt vindicative when Sterling was banned for the NBA for making his racist comments in 2014. I mean, I do believe Baylor, based on all the stories about Donald Sterling. And like I said earlier in the video, Baylor died in Los Angeles of natural causes March 22nd, 2021 at age 86. He was survived by his wife Elaine and their daughters Crystal, and he had 2 children from a previous marriage. Or she had 2 children from a previous marriage. So rest in peace, Elgin Baylor.